Jaya Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Gauranga Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Jaya Gadadhar Jaya Srinivas Jaya Mukunda Vasudevi Jaya Haridas.
Hare Krishna. Welcome, dear devotees. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are on week 3 of our celebration. We've been celebrating Sri Caitanya-caritāmṛta for these 5 weeks, leading us into this wonderful Gaur Purnima festival. And today we are going to be discussing Lord Gauranga's favorite cuisine from none other than our very dear Hare Krishna Srutirupa Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, devotees. Please my obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Jai. Thank you so much, Srutirupa Prabhu, for being willing to join us today and take us into this era of you actually cooking for Srila Prabhupada and learning these wonderful recipes from so many different people. So many of your teachers you're going to tell us about. It's such an honor to welcome you on this platform. For those who do not know Srutirupa Prabhu, Srutirupa Prabhu has lived a life of devotion. She joined the movement as a young teenage girl and was so dedicated in her service that she personally was she had the privilege and honor of cooking for Srila Prabhupada and serving Srila Prabhupada for an extended period of time. She learned different cuisines. She adapted to what Srila Prabhupada liked, how he liked it. What a wonderful example of dedication and service. Thank you so much, Srutirupa Prabhu, for your life of devotion and for all your wonderful service. We are so honored to welcome you on this platform and for you to share with us, memories of Srila Prabhupada related to cooking and Lord Gauranga's favorite cuisine.
Thank you so much. Thank you, dear devotees, for attending today. And I thank this platform, the GBC SPT, for facilitating this, because there's nothing more dear. I mean, I'm not one to generally come out and speak, but this subject matter today is so dear to my heart. The prasadam from the CC, Srila Prabhupada, Pishima, Jamuna, my teachers, there's nothing that gives me more joy. So I hope that I can give you a glimpse into that and inspire you in your daily lives of the treasure that's actually in the Caitanya-caritāmṛta and prasadam, because prasadam is our ticket back home.
It's so wonderfully put there. Yeah, we are a kitchen movement like Srila Prabhupada.
Prabhupada used to tease sometimes in lectures. He would say that you so-and-so had come from prasad, from eating prasad, and he'd look at different devotees. Remember when he came to Miami, he was saying how everyone has come for prasad, and Abhiram, temple president, was there, and he said, and you too, Abhiram, you came from prasad. So many of us are attracted to it, and it's such a vehicle for us, especially in this day and age, because of our, dullness and lack of qualities, that this gift of prasad immediately catapults our spiritual life. It awakens it like that. And Prabhupada would say that Lord Chaitanya actually didn't speak in public philosophy. He only chanted, had kirtan, and gave prasad. And the purport of that is, Prabhupada would say that when you speak philosophy, one can actually forget it when they go away. But the prasadam immediately ignites their spiritual life. It's not to say that we shouldn't speak philosophy. Obviously we do and preach and things, but it's such a, it is our secret weapon. And, for me, I should say me, take it for granted. the eating, but actually the power of it and the significance of it. And this is what Lord Chaitanya preached, and this is what Prabhupada also. You couldn't leave Prabhupada's quarters or leave Prabhupada without him making sure that you got something. He would have either a guard at the door with a jar of sweets, his servant passing them out in the room. You know, there's so many stories, but it was part of our daily activity that we would always have something in a jar for Prabhupada to distribute when any guest came. And the Bengali culture, honestly, that is, you experience India. And I remember in the old days when we went to Puri or around Bengal, because I lived in Calcutta and Mayapur as a young girl, and strangers would just invite total strangers, invite you into their home and offer you a seat, and you would always get water, but you'd always get a sweet. You couldn't, the sweet is part of that Bengali culture. So there's so much to dive into here today. I'm not really sure where we should begin with the culture or the cooking, or you tell
We're
me.
just hoping that you open your treasure chest. We see the wealth that you have been so securely storing. I'm just so eager to see whatever you have to share. And I'm sure one of our guests is mentioning the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. That's such a fact.
Krishna also, the way to Krishna is also is making the things that he likes. So that's our goal.
Beautiful, beautiful. So tell us a little bit about Mother Srutirupa. Tell us a little bit about the cuisine that's mentioned in Sri Caitanya-caritāmṛta.
Well, there's, if you go into the story in the CC about Advaitacharya's time with Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, it describes in there preparation by preparation. The Bengalis there, but then the transliteration you can see, and then the story with Raghava Pandit and Damayanti. There's so many stories. I mean, I have here, the descriptions, the names of them, and this is in the Antya-lila, and it just says, it describes, this is with Raghava Pandit and Damayanti, where
I just pulled some verses up here, right here.
There, and it describes there that they're unparalleled. And what she did was she would make for Lord Chaitanya preparations that would last for a year. And there were in these bags of Raghava Pandit were very famous. And I mean, just imagine. So she would dehydrate dry and the spicing, and she would think of it for his health, she thought he'd be eating so much because people would be wanting to be feeding him. And so she would think of,
right.
She'd be thinking of his digestion. And so there's so many preparations that are described in there with the ginger, the anise, the coriander, and then the dried bitters. She'd dry the bitter leaves of neem, dry the chlorella, and these bags would travel with Lord Chaitanya. And I encourage everyone to read these chapters, read these parts of the CC, because it's not that it's just so inspiring that you can take this up, but you see the relationships, you see the pastimes of the Lord, and this is what's so thrilling for me. When I was a young devotee, we were all waiting for the CC to come out volume by volume by volume, and I can remember each time a volume would come, I'd literally sit there for nonstop, no matter how many days it would take to get through this. And I realized early on that this is the culture that I want to be part of. These are the personalities that I want to know. I mean, they were so rich and deep with relationship. The Caitanya-caritāmṛta is full of relationships and the personal side of our philosophy, and it's so rich. So that's just another part of it, and it's described. Prabhupada describes it's the cream. It's the cream, and then there are quotes for Bhakti Siddhanta. If there were no books left, it would be the CC has everything. And so I don't know, for me, that it was the richness of the relationships and the exchanges and Lord Chaitanya's mercy that is so easily available to everyone, that this, to me, this should be the literature that we all just dive into and embrace and read. But along different lines, so one of those preparations in there that you just had up, Damayanti was describing the coriander, the dhania, and soft fennel, and they call it anise in the transliteration. And just to show you how easy some of these are, just by reading them, I made yesterday, just to show you, I had some sugar syrup in the refrigerator, but these are, so this is like what would go in Raghava Pandit's bags. These are little balls of dried fennel and coriander put in a chini ras, a sugar syrup. And this would aid digestion. This would aid, the stomach. So these are the kind of things you thought about. And they are so wonderful. They don't look so attractive, but I remember once, I also, after Prabhupada left, I became Tamal Krishna Maharaj's personal cook for 2 years while I lived in Dallas. And before I went to Dallas, he came to LA because after Prabhupada left, we moved to Los Angeles. And at that time, Jamuna was doing all the researching for Lord Krishna's cuisine, and I was doing recipe testing for her. And at that point, she was studying all the dishes in the Caitanya-caritāmṛta, and this one really attracted my attention because it's rather simple to do. And so I remember when he came to visit in Los Angeles, and he had some other of his friends with him, and I made these, and they were literally rolling on the floor tasting these, because enter into the mood that this is what the Lord likes, and you're so close to it, and there it is in written form, and then the descriptions of it, and how when I told them the story, I mean, they were such an ecstasy that I used to make these and send them to him along with his travels. He insisted with them, so it was kind of like playing on with the bags of Raghavana. But I encourage everyone, it's in the Anchal Leela, and what was it, verse 22, I think it was?
So yeah, it's Anchal Leela, chapter 10. It starts from verse 15 onwards.
Describes it, and I'm not sure if you put, and so then, we all know of Lord Chaitanya loving sak, and, I think, our Western culture, I think, because I myself thought it until I lived in India, we think of spinach as sak, but actually sak is any green leafy vegetable. So you have hui sak, muli sak, palak sak, you have methi sak. Those are all different types of greens, and it describes in there when Lord Chaitanya was going through the Jharkhand forest that, the devotees would they would go in and pick, the wild greens. So it wasn't just the spinach that we know, it was any greens. So in that way, that's why he described, he loved all these saks, and he described them as, even the bitters, it was described in there that Lord Chaitanya thought they were sweeter than nectar. Mm. And then I think on there too, you have some recipes, if you can show that there's the shukta that's mentioned in the CC, the nim bagan that's mentioned in there, lafra is mentioned in there, and I pulled all these from Jamuna, from her cookbook.
Right. We have
some of those. Right. I need you to see. Where are
Can
they?
you see it? So this is the coconut.
That was the sweet. That's the one that Prabhupada had taught when he first came. It was a very simple sweet. That was with coconut, and I think it has a little camphor and cardamom. But specific, and that's also mentioned. There's so many preparations in the CC with coconut. That's part of our. And there, I think, is the shukta. So there's a nice recipe there, and then it speaks in. She put these together from studying the CC.
This is Mother Jamuna put them together.
These are Jamuna Prabhu's recipes, and then if you see, I put up there another one of the lafra that was also that these preparations are even mentioned in songs, the Bengali songs about Lord Chaitanya. That one there is a nim bagan, so you would take the nim leaves, and it describes Damayanti powdering these neem leaves and sending them. And even with Prabhupada, because bitter is such a important part of the Bengali cuisine. Bitter Ayurvedically is, it tells the stomach that food is coming, so it creates digestive juices and things. So usually a bitter is taken at the beginning of a meal. And I know with Prabhupada, as soon as the plate would go down, the first thing he would say is, "Where's the bitter?" And I'd usually put that on the thali in the very front of the plate, because that's what he'd begin with. But that had to be mandatory. I mean, it had to be there every single day. And when Prabhupada traveled to the West, in the early days, a lot of devotees weren't familiar, or it wasn't so much available, that he would request his cook to dehydrate, to dry some Kerala and put it on the roof in India, and that would travel with him. And so he could always have Kerala on a daily basis. And I myself didn't experience it, but Dina Tarne Prabhu and Jamuna both told me that they'd been up on the roof and seen Prabhupada himself dehydrating. He'd be there squatted down and laying the Kerala out on a sheet. This was in Bombay. And so he could take on his travels. So that's how integral and how important it is in the Bengali cuisine. And I can recall in the early days, it was always said that it's an acquired taste. But I remember from the first time I was living in Calcutta Temple, and the first time I tasted it, I was in love. I was in love. And a lot of devotees who didn't like it, they'd all bring it to me, and I'd sit down at the end and have my little pile of Kerala and eat it. But it is certainly, I didn't have to acquire that taste. There was something that I was relishing. And I think
it's not a one lifetime thing. It's probably lifetimes of thing.
That I can't say, but I truly do find it is as wonderful as nectar. I do love it.
So Srutirupa Prabhu, let me take you back a little bit. We have devotees here. They're all very curious about all of these recipes, and we showed a few glimpses. They want to know a little bit more about the book and the recipes. And
Jamuna's book. Well, Jamuna's book. I mean, it's called Lord Krishna's Cuisine, and that can still be purchased on Amazon. But it's also now in the last year it's come out on Kindle. Kindle. I think that's how you say it, Kindle. So you can have it on your computer. So anybody around the world can have it. And I highly, highly encourage anyone who doesn't have it to go on Amazon and Lord Krishna's Cuisine, and you can get it on Kindle and it's the text. It's a Bible. I mean, it's textbook quality. It takes you from beginning to end, and most of the recipes in there are ones that Prabhupada personally taught her, or she personally cooked for Prabhupada, or they were taught by Pishima to Jamuna, or she had researched recipes out of the Caitanya-caritāmṛta. I mean, it is definitely a PhD in education of our rich culture and cuisine, and it's a book that you really live without if you want to cook and serve the Lord.
Yes, we have that flashing on our screen, Lord Krishna's Cuisine. And thanks to our wonderful Shamnu Saki on the tech, she has it up here on the screen for anybody. Take a look on Amazon, on Kindle, and wonderful recipes right from Sri Caitanya-caritāmṛta.
Jamuna had come to Vrndavan. She'd come to Vrndavan in 1976 when myself and Palika were cooking for Prabhupada, and she came to speak to Prabhupada about the book at that time, and he so much encouraged her to write it. And as I was researching for here in these recipes in the CC, that Prabhupada writes in one of the purports that the editors should learn these recipes, and that these recipes should be a standard in our society. So Prabhupada, even in his purports, was saying when there are these descriptions of these dishes that were made for Lord Chaitanya. And there was one thing I wanted to just read here to you, that Lord Chaitanya, from these preparations that are described, in Advaitacharya's house. And I encourage you to read this story too, because it'll just make you fall in love with, the cooking, the dishes. And as the story goes, just give you a glimpse. He invited Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda to come and eat. And Lord Chaitanya, was wanting to eat simple, and he wasn't hungry. And then so Advaitacharya was saying, oh, they're just simple, we just made some simple rice. And when he got there were like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pots and all these dishes and all these dishes. And Lord Chaitanya in his mind was thinking, he's done this for Krishna, he's done this for his deities, and so he was willing to take it. He wouldn't take it, if it was himself. So the rasa goes on where Lord Chaitanya is eating little and Advaitacharya is filling the pots, and Lord Nityananda is complaining that I came here starving and you've not even fed me. My belly's not even half full. Take this away. And I mean, it's just the exchanges. And this is what I'm saying about the personal relationships and the rasa that's going on it just melts your heart. And so then finally, Lord Nityananda, in the it describes its preparation, the socks, the sweets, everything that's in there. And then Lord Nityananda to go on even further to say that he was angry. And so he took rice and threw it on the floor, that he was angry and not satisfied. And a piece of rice went on Advaitacharya's body, and then he began to dance like a madman from the ecstasy of it. So that goes on to describe, and I encourage you to read that. But the point here I want to get to after that rasa going on with them, Lord Chaitanya says, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu approved of all the methods employed in cooking and offering to Krishna. Indeed, he was so pleased that he said, frankly, I will personally take the lotus feet of anyone who can offer Krishna such nice food and place those lotus feet on my head, birth after birth. I mean, wow. I mean, if that's not an invitation and inspiration and a door that is so attainable, I mean, that's the beauty of this spiritual life that we've been given, is that it's actually simple, but somehow or other, we make it complicated. And it's by, who develops love of God by eating and dancing and singing? This is the process that Prabhupada gave us. So, in Lord Chaitanya completely confirms this. So this is what we have to do: learn how to make these things. And I know I'm not up here, speaking, hey, everybody needs to do this, because I myself, I eat simple and I can be vegan here, or eat raw here or whatever. But I have to say, I'm moving more back into these dishes as I've gotten older. And my whole focus now is trying to understand these old ancient recipes and these recipes that have been forgotten. And I've connected on social media with people in South India that are from heritage. They don't want to lose the heritage of their culture and cuisine. And I'm studying different, and I'm over the moon thrilled, because to eat these dishes brings such pleasure. So I encourage, even just on Sundays, or, for a breakfast, or for feast days, or for special things, to take up Jamuna's book and make something that is pleasing to the Lord. There's a story with Jamuna when Prabhupada, I think it was in 1969. I have it here in my cookbook. This is my original cookbook here, some of those recipes that you saw. This is it's all tattered, but these are my notes when I traveled with Prabhupada and I lived in India and learned from Bhishma and wrote. And I have some of Jamuna's stories in here. And this was a story in 1969, and she goes on to describe, serving Prabhupada a whole thali. And she describes it very beautifully, but Prabhupada basically says, he said to her, who has taught you to make these preparations? And she immediately said, Prabhupada, you have, of course. you have taught me. He said, no, I did not teach you. He said, there are so many varieties. He said, when I left Vrndavan to preach in the Western world, I was prepared to eat only two things, potatoes and bread. He said, I understood that these two things were in the West, potatoes and bread. He said, I never dreamed that my Western boys and girls would learn these things. He said, it is all by the mercy of my spiritual master. Please continue to learn what Krishna likes. I like what Krishna likes. Thank you.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. From your entire talk, there's so many pastimes around prasadam, whether it's Mahaprabhu, whether it's Krishna eating with the cowherd boys, or Mother Yashoda cooking all these things, the Damodar Leela itself, so many pastimes around prasadam. Tell us one of your personal interactions with Srila Prabhupada while cooking for him or serving him prasadam.
Well, I'm thinking about it, since I want to lead into Pishima too, because she was so important in my cooking journey, that I'll lead into that one, because where I learned to cook truly, I began early. If I just give you a little background, I started in 75 in Vrndavan under Devi Shakti Prabhu. She was Prabhupada's cook, and she gave me entry into that world. And once that door was open, I was determined never to let it close.
Maybe I can share a little picture of Pishima here for our audience.
Pishima, yes, please do. But Pishima came after. She probably came in 76. And this is Pishima in the kitchen. And this is where, and in India, it was, we cooked on the floor, and we did everything on the floor. And I can share with you, forgive me, I'm getting to and then after Pishima, when I came back, when Jamuna came in 76 to speak to Prabhupada about the book. And then when I went back to the state, we'd cultivated a relationship. And then she and Dina Tarne Prabhu were living in Oregon. I went there and stayed with them for some time. And so I've got my basics from Pishima. I lived in Calcutta, Mayapur for 2 years, and Pishima's home was in Calcutta. And then she'd come to Mayapur when Prabhupada was there also. And so I would go to her home and study with her. And then when Prabhupada would come to Calcutta, she'd come to the temple. And so my initial cooking started there. But then when I got with Jamuna in the West, it totally, blew the top off of the basics that I had started with in these wonderful recipes from Pishima. But Jamuna took me to another level that of creativity, because like Pishima, Jamuna never made the same thing twice. They're both in Radharani's camp. I don't think Pishima I never saw her in the 2 years make anything the same. And in my lifetime with, the time that I knew Jamuna and spent time with her and Dina Tarne in different places in the world, she was the same. So that took me out of that comfort zone of a recipe, and it had to be like this. I would send Avarama to the store if I didn't have the exact thing. I need the cauliflower, I need that. And Jamuna was like, no, it's whatever's here in the refrigerator, whatever's in the pantry, and then she would create. It was like she could stand blindfolded or backwards and just throw the things in. Chapatis got elevated to a whole nother level. Have you ever had sweet potato chapatis, papaya chapatis, paneer chapatis? Whatever was there, she could turn it into a chapati. She could turn it into a khichdi. She could turn it into whatever. So to be able to live and witness that is what made me go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And so I wanted to share with you some of the things that actually from Prabhupada's kitchen. I have this. This is called a silbata.
Wow.
Pishima there. This was from his kitchen. And how do I end up with it? Is because when I went with him on that last trip in 77 to England, I don't know if you can see this. So everything was ground You put water on it. You grind every single thing from the dals to the rice to the spices to the gingers to everything. And so I would go in like 2 hours early before we began. I would do breakfast, but then after breakfast, spend an hour and 45, grinding everything. And so when Bhishma would come in, everything would be set up. There'd be the ground paste of the ginger, the ground Prabhupada at that time when I was cooking, it had changed from dry spices to everything wet spices paste, because he said nothing was pure and he wanted everything pure and fresh. So everything was ground to a paste. So I'd soak overnight the whole peppercorn, soak overnight the coriander seeds, soak overnight the cumin seeds. This was a daily thing. Even soak dried turmeric, which would take 4 or 5 days to soak. And then soak the dals, because Bhishma always cooked with these thing called buddies. You can either sun dry them or use them fresh if they're in the book. And that's kind of Bengali cooking. I'm sure every part of India has their version of what they do, but my training was in Bengali cooking. And then as I, met other wonderful cooks, I learned from some Gujarati and, so different things like this. But so that was a big part of it. And
some of our audience here, they might not even know who Pishima is. Do you want to say a little bit something about
Pishima? Can you show that picture again? Because
absolutely,
Pishima physically is like a female version of Prabhupada. When you see her face, you can pull up that photo.
Yes, I can. Give me a second.
So Pishima, it's actually her real name is Bhavatarini, but Pishima means auntie, and she is Prabhupada's sister. And so, to give you a little glimpse into who she was as a person is, again, it's like a personality out of the Caitanya-caritāmṛta. And that's the only way I was able to understand her, because she didn't speak English. In my pidgin Bengali, we would always, I could talk kitchen Bengali or market Bengali, to shop. And what she didn't understand, or what I didn't understand from her, was done by facial or whatever. But Pishima was honestly another personality out of Mahaprabhu's pastimes. And she knew the CC very well, and I didn't know that at the time, but because of my reading the CC all before I met her, because of her eccentric personality, or I don't know, qualities, I should say. I wouldn't say personality. It's almost like something that's developed in life, but her qualities, her Vaishnava qualities, were truly out of the pages of the CC. She always had a bottle of Ganga Jal. Ganga Jal is the water. And so she had, wherever she sat when she got up, she threw Ganga Jal. If someone took something, she threw Ganga Jal. I remember once when I was at her house, I was there with Jamuna and Palika when Jamuna was doing research, and I had my camera, and she had the childhood deities of hers and Prabhupada's there, and she worshipped those childhood deities. So they were upstairs, and we went up, and I was ringing the bell and seeing, and she told her servant to go up there and take the Ganga Jal and throw it on the rope where I rang the bell. And then I was doing this with the camera. She threw so much Ganga Jal on my camera, I didn't think it would ever work again. This was like, and for me, it would just make my heart swell, because this person, was so glorious, and it was not something that I was used to or something that I understood, but I accepted it as something from another realm. And so as far as you asked the story of Prabhupada, with a story, I wanted to bring in Pishima because it was an interesting story with her sitting there. You have that mental picture of her sitting there. Pishima, Bengali cooking is very strong on mustard oil. So, and Pishima, and mustard oil is not like this rank, low class thing. There is such fine mustard oil; it's finer than ghee when you can get it. I was told that through Bhagaji, who Prabhupada's friend. You may have heard about him in Vrndavan, up in the Himalayas. He says you can get very, very fine mustard oil. And Jamuna tells a story. I think Dina Tarne might tell that in her book, where when she was learning to cook from Pishima in Vrndavan when they were staying at Radha Damodar, she sent Jamuna, I don't know how many umpteen times into the bazaar to get mustard oil, and every time she rejected it. So I think probably on the 5th day or whatever, she said she would go. And they went in and, you know, to find this finer mustard oil. So at any rate, she cooked with a lot of mustard oil, and then it came to a point where Prabhupada wouldn't let her use mustard oil. But Prabhupada is known to be saying, if you want to cook for taste, you cook with mustard oil. If you want to cook for health, you cook with ghee. So the things that when Prabhupada came to Calcutta, she would always send things from home. And I have to tell you, what she sent from home never tasted like when she taught us, because she obviously cooked with the mustard oil at home. I mean, they were like described in the CC, I mean, like nectar. When she would make shukta at home, it would send you flying. But of course, it was wonderful when she taught, when she would come, because we would cook with ghee, but it was a whole nother level. And the first time I ever had it, I went to her house once to pick her up for Rath Yatra in Calcutta. She fed me khichdi, and she made it with mustard oil, and I've never had khichdi since with mustard oil, and it blew the top off. I mean, I couldn't believe the wonderful taste. So at any rate, long story short, we were in Mayapur, and because we didn't let her have mustard oil, she used a lot of mustard paste. So I'm grinding on the stone all her paste masalas. She had a big, you know, bowl, katori of mustard paste, and she made sure that mustard paste went into everything, the lafra, the shukta, you know, the vegetables, the paste. So Prabhupada was very sensitive to certain things, and he complained to me over a couple of days that his hands were swelling, and he blamed it on the mustard that Pishima was cooking with. And so after one day, you know, after this going on for a few days, Prabhupada said to me, because after Prabhupada the other thing about Prabhupada, if you see that picture, you did scan through it, where Prabhupada was sitting there at the Radha Damodar temple eating. Prabhupada didn't just, I mean, eat in the sense where we eat, we talk, we, you know, drive and we eat, we, you know, what, we watch a video or do whatever and eat. This is not the process. Prabhupada honored eating. He honored prasad. He didn't have guests in there with him. I mean, there were occasions, obviously, where they were there, but he would honor prasad, and it would take Prabhupada. So there, Jamuna told me that picture back one, that was at Radha Damodar, and that was his kitchen and eating area, and just off to the side is where she would cook. But he was sitting there meditating. He was listening to the Damodar Astika prayers. And he was looking at that time, the Samadhi of Rupa Goswami was right outside that window. And that was Prabhupada's normal way of eating. It was honoring, and he was tasting. And he was relishing is the word. And you could see that it wasn't an ordinary affair. It wasn't eating and rushing and if someone had arrived, he would give them something off his plate and just like nod his head so they would go. He would give them something because he did not sit and talk and eat. It was a meditation and it was honoring. So, but then my point being is, so after he finished eating, he would sit there while you cleaned his chonky and he would take all the katoris off and empty them. So he would sit there, and usually with a toothpick, he'd pick and he'd watch you, and you're sitting there with head down because you know he's staring right through you, and you're putting everything back together to clean up. And so this one day he's sitting there and he's watching me, and he says, "Do not let her back in the kitchen." And I come my eyes, I mean, like the eyes went in the back of my head. You know, I couldn't imagine life without Pishima in the kitchen. And Pishima was so in love with Prabhupada and so devoted to Prabhupada. I mean, it would have sent her, you know, I don't know what. So he said, "Do not let her back in the kitchen." He said, "She's killing me." You know, and if anybody heard that today, God knows where that story would go. He said, "She's killing me with these mustard seeds." And so the mustard, and he said, "Do not let her back in the kitchen." So I was like, I was having 3,000 thoughts, and my head was just spinning, and I just cleaned up everything. So Bhishma would come like clockwork every day for lunch. Unless I needed her. If there was something I didn't know that Prabhupada wanted, I would call her, because she was living in the long building right there where Prabhupada's the first building. And I would call her to come in and show me something or help me do something, but it was usually lunch. So she would come in at a certain time when I had everything. And I knew that day she would be walking in the door, and I didn't have the heart to say, Pishima, you can't. Prabhupada doesn't want you in the kitchen anymore. I mean, there was no way that I could say that to her. And so she sat down like you saw her there, you know, happy smile, and she had her foot knife. She was ready to begin, and everything was spread out. We had the vegetable, I had everything cut out in tallies, you know, whatever vegetables were using that day, the lokis, the jinga, the portals. These are all things that Prabhupada liked, the Karela. And everything ground up. And so then she wanted to start, she didn't see the mustard paste. And so she looked at me, and I just said, Pishima, Prabhupada bolo ne. And she looked at me. I said, Prabhupada bolo sarson ne. Sarson is Bengali for mustard seeds. I think in Hindi you say rye. So I'd say sarson ne. And her eyes got, you know, she's like, what? What's that? I mean, how are you even going to cook? And so if you see this stone, you see it has little pitted holes in it. And it's these holes that where the things get ground. It's not smooth. And so after you use it for a long time, you get it repitted, because that's where the things, and then the friction of this, it grinds it to a paste. I mean, it's equivalent to having a blender today. So, and I didn't tell you how I ended up with this is because when we went to London, you know, I didn't think, oh, I'll just get a blender there or a food processor. I mean, didn't have those thoughts. Oh, I got to take Prabhupada's silbacha. This weighs like 15, 20 pounds. You know, I carried this on the airplane. So that's how I ended up with it. So at any rate, Pishima is there, and she's got these big cow eyes looking at me. And she's like pleading with me, like, are you kidding me? How are we going to cook today? So I couldn't deny her, because she was just absolutely, you know, lovable. So I took one mustard seed, and if you could know it, one mustard seed, and I set it on that stone, and it fell into one of those pits. I mean, you couldn't even find it. It just dropped into that pit. And Pishima looked at me, and I went, Bas, no more. I said, Bas. And we both just cracked up laughing. We started laughing. She literally threw water on that one seed, and she took the stone herself and started to grind that one mustard seed. We laughed and laughed, and she tried to scrape that out of that hole to use that, you know, but I thought to myself, I couldn't deny her coming in to break her heart. And, you know, how could I explain to her? And then I could not do what Prabhupada said. So in my mind, this is the rascal that I am, that I thought, okay, I can figure this out. So I just cut her off. I cut her off of the mustard, and I still had her there. So then that day, so I had Prabhupada's lunch, everything we did, and then Prabhupada's sitting there, and he's looking at me, and he says, so you told her? And in my mind, I was thinking, well, yeah, I did. I told her she didn't get any mustard seeds. So I just went, and I couldn't even look at him, because I knew that I was being a rascal, because I didn't do exactly what he said, but I honored what he wanted. And so I just went, mm-hmm. I didn't even look up. I just went, mm-hmm. That I was in my heart, I thought I managed the situation. So that was one of the little tale with Pishima and Prabhupada in the kitchen, or not in the kitchen, but, you know, cooking. So
I know, you know, the Vaishnavi ministry is organizing a wonderful event with you talking about Pishima all together.
Oh, it's the Vaishnav ministry doing that?
Yes, it's the International Vaishnavi Ministry. So please follow International Vaishnavi Ministry page and look out for this wonderful detail. We're going to have an event with Srutirupa Prabhu talking about Pishima throughout. It's
go on and on about Pishima.
I wanted to ask you one thing. You touched upon it gently, that Srila Prabhupada, always honored prasadam. He definitely, whenever he sat, you mentioned he was not on the go eating prasadam. He always relished prasadam. We saw some pictures. Tell us a little bit more about what Srila Prabhupada liked. Did he like to cook? I know, Mother Jamuna, she's mentioned so many times she's learned cooking. How about, did Srila Prabhupada come into the kitchen, try to cook something? To give us a little glimpse into what was it like in the kitchen over there.
Well, there's a couple times that, yes, he did like to cook. He knew cooking very well. And there was even occasions, when he would instruct you what to, that day, what he wanted, and he would say how to do it. And one day I'd come in and say, I'm eating $5, I'm eating $3, or, on sock like this. And sometimes he'd even have to bring in the spinach and he would cut it on his desk and show you exactly how he wanted it. And then other times he'd come in the kitchen, and then there was occasion in 76 when it was the beginning of him not being well. An Ayurvedic doctor, put him on a special diet where he was to have no ghee and no salt. And Prabhupada came in the kitchen day after day after day and cooked himself, and we assisted. There was Harisari in the kitchen, Palika in the kitchen, myself in the kitchen, and he cooked on the cooker. And he cooked everything in that one cooker. And I'd like to speak about that cooker in a minute, but to answer you on the, he did come in and he taught and then on some days he would even say, I want the dal on the bottom and the shukta on the middle or on the top. And then on other days he'd say, put the shukta on the bottom and the dal on another tier. There were 3 tiers. And inside of here, these 2 tiers have inserts, a steel insert, and there's holes like a steamer. I mean, I could take it apart and show it to you. And so the steam would go up. So what was on here was you had to be really, really conscious because this could boil out. And I remember once in Bhubaneswar, when I was cooking for Prabhupada, I was cooking on a wood fire. You couldn't smell if anything was burning because it was all wood and it all smelled like everything was smoke and burning. And at that time, he wanted the shukta on the bottom. And that day when I took it out, it was, oh my God, there was no water, and shukta is water, and it had a crust on the bottom, and I had to scrape it, and he had to have shukta. At that point, I couldn't start over. And it had a smoky taste. It wasn't offensive, but it had a smoky taste. And I remember Prabhupada liking it very much, and he commented, but when I took the remnants, Palika was there, she wasn't well, so I took the remnants to her, and she immediately spit it out and said, this is burned. Prabhupada actually, he liked it. So cooking with a cooker was an art, and Prabhupada taught that, and he would cook in it, and he when he came there, and it's in Harisari's diaries, when Prabhupada came in during that time, and he said that one of the days I was there, he said, so he made the different things. And then on the rice, he had the rice in the middle. So you have the insert with the water with the rice. And then on the insert, the sides, he would slip some other vegetable. So that was another prep. And then on top of the rice, he would lay a potato. So he'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then another one, 5. And then this top, he would take off and fry the curly. You have 6. He would get 6 or 7 preparations out of this cooker. Wow. I mean, it was genius. And then on that one day, he said, you can cook enough for 4 gentlemen, he said, 4 gentlemen in this cooker. And he made a joke. He said, in 45 minutes, he said, now, he said, you can go and sleep. He was joking. He probably got a wonderful sleep. He joked a lot. So, but what he did then was he actually made the chapatis, and we all got to eat what Prabhupada had not only made, from that, the cooks and the servants there. So that was an occasion. But the very first time I saw Prabhupada in the kitchen, he was coming in to teach a recipe that we hadn't figured out. That's when Jamuna and Palika and I went to Calcutta, and Arundhati was in charge, Pradunya's wife, to take over Prabhupada's cooking while we were gone. And when we came back, she showed us this one new preparation Prabhupada taught, and we just weren't getting it right, and he wasn't happy. So he said, tomorrow I'll come in and I'll show you. So it was right after his massage. He came in his gamsha, and he was all oiled up. And it was like, before he would go take bath, and then after bath, he would say Gayatri, and then the plate. Everything was very timely and punctual on the exact moment and second. So it was right after the massage, and he came in, and I have to tell you, I don't know if you've been in Prabhupada's kitchen in Vrndavan, you almost have to lower your head to get in. It's very small. And when that door opened, or this door opened, and Prabhupada was standing there, all of a sudden you got this waft of this sandalwood. His head was massaged in sandalwood, and his body was massaged in mustard oil. And when you got this waft come in, and then Prabhupada stepped in, I remember him stepping in, he stopped at the doorway, and he looked around, and he said, I've never been in my kitchen before. He said, it is very nice. And in that moment, when he stepped in, I'm telling you, this was a visceral feeling. It felt like all the oxygen just went, and Prabhupada filled that entire room. His presence filled that entire little capsule of his kitchen. And it was extraordinary. And the first thing, he turned to the right where I was sitting, because I was cutting the vegetables, and I had a bucket there, like a milk pail. And I had taken the cauliflower, and you know how you take it and you core it. And I threw the core into the bucket, and then I kept the flowers. The first thing he looked at, he said, why you've thrown that away? I didn't say a word, but you don't waste anything. And that was one of Prabhupada's principles. I mean, I could go on to so many different things. I'm trying to sum up for you. But he noticed that. I didn't say a word, but I made a mental note about waste. And then I started becoming more conscious. And when I would see Pishimo or even other cooks cooking, he'd see them cut up that core, even the leaves that come around the cauliflower. It's another type of sock. They'd throw that into a dal. Throw that into, nothing is wasted. And this is, part of the whole consciousness. And so then he came around his little kitchen and he sat. And I mean, that's a whole story. I mean, I don't know if you want to hear that or we go to another subject.
Please continue.
Oh, that's a hysterical story.
Please.
So we had a little seat for him, and we had but we had a milk pail bucket with cow dung on it, clay, mud and cow dung, and then had cut a hole in it. We put coals in there. And then the top of it was, mud and cow dung. And so it became a stove. And this is how we cooked. We didn't just, have ovens and so on and so forth. So we had these coal buckets, and we always did the chapatis on it. And there was a few other preps. And then we did have a small little propane 2 burners. So Prabhupada sat on this seat we had for him. We had everything cut up that he wanted, all the spices. Palika and I both stand there. And his friend Bhagaji came in. Bhagaji was with him. You've heard of him in Prabhupada's stories. And so Bhagaji was standing there. They kept talking back and forth in Hindi. And we were staying there with the spices, and the pot was there, and Prabhupada put in the spices, and he'd talk to Bhagaji, and Palika would take the flame because it was on high. And the truth of it is, Bengalis cook on high flames. They cook on high heat. And Prabhupada had the heat all the way high, threw the spices in, talking to Bhagaji, and Palika just, turned it down. And Prabhupada told him, he came back, put more things in. He noticed he turned it up, and then he's putting more things in, and talking to Bhagaji. And Palika again turns it down. This happens 3 times. She turns it down, talking to Bhagaji. And the 3rd time he saw it, he turned it up. He said, Hari Baba, why are you messing? That's become a tagline in my life. Hari Baba, why are you messing? So, at any rate, so that was that. And so then when he finished that preparation, he looked at Bhagaji and he said, see, so simple still they cannot do. And then he and Bhagaji got into, this is the story that is so fascinating. So in that conversation, they were back and forth in Hindi, and Prabhupada was telling him about cooking on the stove and so on and so forth. But then he switched over to English. And he said, on these 2 burners, he said, I can make prasad for 100 men in 45 minutes. And Bhagaji looked at him and he said, Khichdi. And Prabhupada said, no, full prasad. Can make full prasad. And Bhagaji said, impossible. They were talking now in English. He said, impossible. And Prabhupada looked at him, because I keep turning, because Bhagaji was kind of the side, and Prabhupada turned, and Prabhupada said, I will bet you 1 lakh of rupees. And she started to laugh, and we're sitting there, you know, our eyes are like, we're standing there. And Bhagaji started to laugh. He said, Prabhupada, he said, whatever I had, if I win or lose, you still take my money. He said, and Prabhupada laughed, and then he got up, and then he went to go take his shower. That was that. And we're standing, Palika and I, and Harisari went out with Prabhupada, and Palika and I are just standing there, and as he went, all that oxygen left, and all that space just went with him. I mean, when he came in because it's a very small little room, and there's no windows, and there's the door. And when he came in, I mean, it literally, he filled that entire space. And when he walked out, it was a whole nother thing. And we're just kind of left there almost we weren't limp. You become ecstatic. But then it's just like a page turned. It was like stepping into the spiritual world, just being in those close quarters with Prabhupada.
Thank you. That's beautiful. So beautiful. We're actually visualizing you narrating this pastime. I want to show our audience a couple more pictures of the grove that you sent. But before that, how about we show them a short video clip that you sent me about Srila Prabhupada in the kitchen?
Oh, with the cooker, because I want to tell you a little bit more about the cooker. Yeah.
I don't know if that's the cooker. That's the time.
Yeah.
Should I show that video clip?
Sure.
Okay, let's see if I can pull it up. Sorry, give me a minute.
Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna.
Can you hear me? So, you know,
I can hear
that
you.
was 1977 after he left Mayapur. And I don't know if you noticed, but if you could see his hands, they were very, very swollen. They were very full. And Prabhupada was very thin then, and he was eating very, very little. And he took this last trip, and there was some of his, you know, Bhakti Charu, he was a brahmachari. Bhakti Charu was the brahmachari there, and part of that clip, there was Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Pradumna was there, Yadabar, I think, was filming that. I know he was. And he was in the kitchen teaching them. And he taught them the same basic things that he taught in 1965, 1966. He taught the same way of making, nothing had changed. But, you know, on the cooker here, which I want to bring this up, you see this here, but this is not mine. This is Tamal Krishna Maharaj gave this to Jamuna after Prabhupada left, and this is in Dina Tarne's care. And I'm bringing this up at this time, and Dina Tarne put it on loan with me when I was teaching some cooking and trying to inspire devotees. But the plan right now is to try to get support and devotees to help with the museum in the West. We have museums in India, but there's nothing in the West. And we're all at this age now, and here in Alachua where I live, there's over 150 Prabhupada disciples, and everybody has something, either shoes or some treasure, bead bag, Prabhupada's Brahmin thread, books, original books and manuscripts, and then of course the famous cooker, and these all need to go into a museum. And so what we're hoping and trying to do is create some enthusiasm and interest for those that have, that they can, bring forth at, when we all leave this world, that these can all be put somewhere and worshipped and treasured, and including this cooker. So we're looking to create a museum for all of this. And so I'm just plugging this in right now because you see this, you may be wondering why, I don't have, and I plan to continue with teaching, and I want to teach these things and inspire the devotees, but this needs a home. And I have many treasures, actually, not only the stone here that I was showing you, this came with me too. This is what I would make Prabhupada's medicine in. And so when we traveled,
we can't see it if you just move your camera. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little stone. I would grind his Ayurvedic pills. Excuse me, I got to sneeze. And so this came with me too. And a couple more things came with me when I left London. I have here, this here is one of Prabhupada's silver bowls, and this is his silver spoon. And if you see where are we? In that spoon, it's taped, and there's a piece of rice. There's a piece of rice from Prabhupada's plate that is still intact. It hasn't disintegrated. And I think of it as in that story with the Dvaitacharya, when Lord Nityananda threw the rice. So this is my madman ecstasy. And I think everybody should be able to experience this. Prabhupada's rice still on the spoon. And there's his bowl, and there's actually some hair in that little container. And I have shoes and beads, different things. And so many devotees have similar. I know devotees have so much. And so I encourage anyone who has things to come forward, to be able to leave, to think about their will, to, where these things will go. I mean, most people leave them with their kids and then the next generation, and they're not going to be as valued, and other devotees being able to experience this unless we have a museum. So this is one of my pleas today, that we want to create this museum here in the West, and where all of these things will go. So I'm hoping that devotees will come forward, not only in support and bringing their things, but also financial support to help us create this museum for Prabhupada's legacy. So
beautiful. I'm sure there'll be so many inspired to do that. Thank you so much for this wealth and opening your treasure box. You have this great fortune of association with Srila Prabhupada, and then learning from Pishima. As a second generation, I've heard different kinds of stories about Pishima, how devotees were not able to get along with her, and you have such a wonderful perspective of how you saw her through the Caitanya-caritāmṛta. So many beautiful recipes, your gratitude to Mother Jamuna, so many things you shared with us today. It was so heart-touching. I'm telling you, this is the fastest hour of my life. I can't even believe we've been talking for an hour, and this could just continue. Please continue to share these beautiful memories that you have in your association with Srila Prabhupada. I wanted to highlight one beautiful picture of you cooking for Srila Prabhupada in the mango grove. Before
I don't have, but in the mango grove, it was between Calcutta and Mayapur, and Prabhupada always, it was when he was driving either there or here I am in the white sari with the red, and that's Bhakti Charu. Again, he's a brahmachari there. And then fanning Prabhupada is Rup Damodar, and then that's also Bhavananda Maharaj there. And then Prabhupada. And you can, if you zone in, you can see how swollen Prabhupada's hands are. You can see in that photo. Like I said, this was the early days of him getting ill. And, you know, at that point, that's where I said he blamed Pishima, but that wasn't, you know, the case. Prabhupada had something called dropsy, which is it has to do with the kidneys, and your body retains water. And that's where Prabhupada was as well. But so my point is, that's a little bit of a picture of the mango grove, but there's another one that I put on there that you could see the actual mango grove. And so there are the devotees there that were traveling with Prabhupada. And this was this amazing old mango grove. And he would take his breakfast or take his lunch. He always stopped and we had this picnic. And it was such a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I went to Mayapur, I don't know, four years ago, maybe. And I was talking about the mango grove, and Narshwar Prabhu said, it's no more. Because I was saying, where's the mango grove? I was looking as I drove, and he said that they've torn it down and created something there. But it was this wonderful place that Prabhupada chose himself. And I can only imagine, you know, what took place there. But we had a wonderful, he always stopped there, going to and from Mayapur to eat. And it was a very sweet pastime.
Wow. Wow.
Go on and tell you so many on that, but at any rate, yeah, it's been a wonderful hour, and there's so many stories about Pishima that you mentioned that I think that's on the 4th of April. I'm not sure. I'm speaking to one lady devotee from South Africa, Karuna.
Yeah, so Radha Prabhu just mentioned that it's the Vaishnavi Ministry is hosting that event, and it is in honor of Pishima, and you're going to be talking. We can't wait to hear more. And what I hear from her, it's on the 7th, I believe.
On the 7th, okay. Yeah, I haven't had my conversation. I think initially we were thinking that, but I'm speaking to her actually tomorrow on it.
Yeah, April 7th, and they're honoring the disappearance of Pishima.
Okay.
So it is the disappearance day of Pishima, and we can't wait to hear from you. We will be hosting that event on the Vaishnavi Ministry International's page. So please, you know, follow that page, and, you know, make sure you tune in again to hear wonderful stories about Pishima. And thank you so much, Srutirupa Prabhu. None of us are leaving, you know, the audience hasn't dropped. I don't feel like going. You've taken us back into the era when Srila Prabhupada walked this planet. And really, I'm reading the comments pouring in. Some devotees are saying you've inspired them to learn to cook. You're inspiring them to really take cooking seriously, or for sharing. Very enlightening. You know, I'm so grateful to hear these wonderful pastimes. Absolutely beautiful. Wow. Excellent. Sounds like something my daughters would love to do. We're just pouring with all this love and affection that the guests are sharing with us. Thank you so much for sharing.
I thank you because you've helped me, you know, go to uncover these locked away memories and stories that nothing gives me greater joy. So keep pulling it, because I'd love to give it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to have you. And thank you so much to all our guests for your active participation, for your encouragement. Please continue to keep tuning in, and just stay alive and stay inspired. Thank you very much. So take a moment to subscribe to the GBC SPT page, and also tune in to the Vaishnavi Ministry on the 7th of April, where Srutirupa Prabhu is going to be talking about Pishima. Thank you so much, everyone. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.